March 18, 2019. At exactly 3:07 in the morning, the first knock came. 3 slow taps against a quiet suburban front door. Not loud. Not desperate. Just deliberate. Inside the house, Daniel Harper woke instantly. The sound had come from downstairs, sharp enough to cut through the silence of the night. For a moment he stayed still in bed, listening, unsure if he had imagined it. Then it came again. 3 knocks. Evenly spaced. His wife Melissa stirred beside him. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Daniel nodded, already sitting up. The digital clock beside the bed read 3:07 a.m. He walked to the window and looked down at the street below. Nothing. No parked cars with headlights on. No movement. No shadows. Just empty pavement glowing under a single streetlight. When he reached the front door a minute later, the knocking had stopped. He waited. Silence. Slowly, he opened the door. Cold air drifted into the hallway. The porch was empty. No footsteps. No movement. No one walking away. Just stillness. He checked the driveway. Nothing. The first time, Daniel assumed it was a mistake. Maybe a drunk neighbor. Maybe teenagers playing games. Maybe someone knocking on the wrong house. But the second night proved him wrong. Because at exactly 3:07 a.m., the knocking came back. 3 slow knocks. The same rhythm. The same spacing. The same calm, deliberate sound. Daniel sat up before the third knock even finished. He already knew what time it was. 3:07 a.m. This time he moved faster. He rushed to the front window and pulled the curtain aside. The street was empty again. Perfectly still. No one running away. No cars leaving. No shadows moving under the streetlight. Only silence. Melissa refused to go back to sleep. Neither of them did. The third night was when the fear started. Because the knocking didn't just happen again. It happened the same way. 3:07 a.m. 3 knocks. Exactly the same spacing. Exactly the same sound. Daniel reached the door within seconds. He opened it immediately. No one. Not on the porch. Not on the sidewalk. Not anywhere in sight. It was as if whoever knocked had disappeared in seconds. Or had never been there at all. By the 4th night, Daniel stayed awake on purpose. He sat in the dark living room watching the clock. 3:05, nothing. 3:06, silence. 3:07, knock. 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 The sound echoed through the house. Daniel jumped to his feet and threw the door open. Empty porch. Empty street. No movement. No sound except distant wind. That was the moment Daniel realized something was wrong. Not strange. Not unusual. Wrong. Because whoever was knocking knew exactly when to arrive. And they knew exactly when to leave. Within a week, Daniel installed a motion light above the front door. The next night at 3:07 a.m. the knocks returned. 3 slow taps. The motion light never turned on. That was the first thing that made no sense. The second thing was worse. Because when Daniel checked the door the next morning, he found something he hadn't noticed in the dark. 3 faint marks on the wood. As if something hard had tapped the surface. Not scratches. Not damage. Just small pale spots in the paint. Perfectly aligned. Like fingerprints pressed into the door. That was when Melissa said the words Daniel had been trying not to think. What if it's the same person every night? Daniel didn't answer. Because he was starting to wonder something else. If it was the same person, how did they disappear so fast? And why did they always come at exactly 3:07 a.m.? 2 nights later, the knocking changed. Still at 3:07 a.m. Still 3 knocks. But this time, there was something else. After the third knock, something brushed softly against the door. Like a hand sliding across the wood. Melissa heard it too. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. They sat frozen in the darkness listening. Waiting. The sound stopped after a few seconds. No footsteps followed. No movement. Only silence again. Daniel did not open the door that night. For the first time, he was afraid of what might be standing on the other side. And the worst part was the feeling that whoever it was knew they were inside. And knew they were awake. The next morning, Daniel went out and bought cameras. Not a full security system. Just 2 small motion-activated cameras, one facing the front door and another aimed toward the driveway. He installed them himself that afternoon. By sunset everything was working. Melissa tested the system from her phone. Clear picture. Wide angle. Nothing unusual. That night neither of them slept. They sat together on the couch watching the live camera feed on Daniel's laptop. 2:58 a.m. The street was empty. 3:02 a.m. Nothing moved. 3:05 a.m. Stillness. Even the trees were barely shifting in the wind. At 3:07 a.m., the knocking came. 3 slow taps. Knock. 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 Melissa gasped. Daniel froze. The camera feed showed the front door clearly. And there was no one there. No figure. No shadow. No movement. Just the closed door. Yet the knocking continued. The sound was unmistakable. Wood against something solid. Real. Close. Directly in front of them. Daniel opened the door immediately. The porch was empty again. But this time something felt different. The air felt colder than before. Still. Heavy. Like the quiet before a storm. Inside, Melissa was staring at the laptop screen. Her face had gone pale. Daniel, come here. He walked back into the living room. She rewound the footage. 3:06 and 52 seconds a.m. Nothing. 3 hours 6 minutes and 55 seconds, still empty. 3 hours 6 minutes and 58 seconds, a faint flicker crossed the image. So subtle it almost looked like a glitch. Then the timestamp changed. 3 hours and 7 minutes, the first knock echoed through the house. Melissa paused the video. Zoomed in. Near the edge of the frame, something stood just outside the camera's angle. Not visible. But close enough that a narrow shape cast a thin shadow across the porch floor. A human-shaped shadow. Standing directly in front of the door. Daniel watched the footage 3 times. He couldn't explain it. Nothing entered the frame. Nothing left the frame. Yet something had been close enough to block the light. That was the night Melissa stopped staying alone in the house. 2 days later, Daniel spoke to the neighbors. At first he expected laughter. Instead he got silence. Mrs. Alvarez from across the street avoided eye contact. Then she said something that made Daniel's stomach tighten. You hear it too? Daniel stared at her. What do you mean too? She hesitated before answering. I thought it was kids, or someone drunk. Late at night. Daniel asked her what time. She didn't answer immediately. Then she said it quietly.
Okay?
After 3. Another neighbor confirmed hearing it.
I heard something upstairs.
Soft knocking. Sometimes distant. Sometimes
Who's
closer.
on the phone?
Always late. But no one had ever seen anyone.
We need to ask
The pattern
you a few
continued.
questions.
Every night.
What is this about?
3:07 a.m.
There was an incident
3 knocks.
reported.
Sometimes
I don't
followed
know
by
anything.
silence. Sometimes
to
followed by faint
verify
movement
that.
near the door. One night the camera recorded something new. At 3 hours 6 minutes and 59 seconds, 1 second before the knocking began, a shape passed across the porch light. Too fast to identify. Too narrow to be clear. But unmistakably human in height. Daniel slowed the video frame by frame. For less than half a second, a tall dark figure appeared beside the door. Long arms. Still posture. Head slightly tilted downward. Then it vanished. The next frame showed nothing. Just the empty porch. That night Daniel locked every window. Checked every room. Then checked again. Melissa barely spoke anymore. Neither of them mentioned sleep. They waited. Night after night. Watching the clock. Listening. Until one night, the knocking didn't stop after 3 taps. It continued. Slow. Measured. Steady. Knock, pause, knock, pause, knock. Melissa grabbed Daniel's arm. The knocking went on for almost a minute. Longer than ever before. Then it stopped suddenly. Daniel approached the door slowly. His hand hovered over the handle. Melissa whispered behind him. "Don't." But Daniel opened the door anyway. And for the first time, something was there. Not a person. Not exactly. Just beyond the edge of the porch light, stood a tall dark shape. Still. Silent. Watching. Daniel stepped forward. The shape moved backward into the darkness. Not running. Not fast. Just retreating. Like it had expected him to follow. Daniel didn't move. The figure stood at the edge of the shadows. Barely visible. Then it turned, and walked slowly down the sidewalk. Daniel watched until it disappeared into the darkness. That was the first time anyone had seen the visitor. And after that night, everything became worse. Daniel called the police the next morning. 2 officers arrived just after sunrise. They checked the porch, the yard, and the street. One officer walked the sidewalk for nearly half a block before turning back. There were no footprints in the damp soil near the lawn. No marks on the concrete. No signs that anyone had been standing there for long. The officers reviewed the camera footage inside the house. They watched the shadow appear beside the door. They watched the figure pass across the porch light. Neither officer tried to explain it. One of them finally said what Daniel had already begun to suspect. "If someone's doing this, they know your schedule." The patrol car drove past the house several times that night. At 3:07 a.m., the knocking came anyway. 3 slow taps. The officers saw nothing. The cameras recorded nothing. But the sound echoed through the house exactly as before. After that, the patrols stopped. The report listed it as unidentified suspicious activity. Weeks passed. The knocking never missed a night. 3:07 a.m. 3 knocks. Sometimes the faint brushing sound followed. Sometimes just silence. Daniel started noticing small things. The motion light above the door would occasionally flicker during the night. Once he found the front gate slightly open even though he had locked it. Another morning he discovered damp footprints on the driveway that faded before reaching the street. Too long to be animal tracks. Too narrow to be shoes. Melissa stopped answering the door during the day. She stopped sleeping entirely. By early April, Daniel began staying awake every night in the living room chair. Watching the clock. Listening for movement. The pattern never changed. Until April 11th. That night the knocking came early. 3:06 a.m. Just 1 minute before the usual time. 3 slow knocks. Daniel stood up immediately. Something felt different. Wrong. He moved toward the door before the sound had even finished echoing through the house. Melissa followed behind him. The clock turned to 3:07 a.m. as Daniel reached the handle. He opened the door. The porch was empty. But the motion light flickered on and off above him. Once. Twice. Then darkness again. Daniel stepped outside. Cold air filled his lungs. The street looked empty. But the silence felt heavier than usual. Too quiet. He turned back toward the doorway. Melissa was standing frozen in the hall. Her eyes wide. Staring past him. Not at him. Behind him. Daniel turned slowly. And saw the marks. Fresh marks on the door. 3 pale spots pressed into the paint. Perfectly aligned. Still damp. As if they had just been made seconds earlier. But he had opened the door immediately. No one had been there. No one could have touched the door. Melissa whispered something he barely heard. It was just here. Daniel checked the camera footage before sunrise. He watched every second between 3:05 and 3:10 a.m. At 3 hours 5 minutes and 48 seconds, the porch was empty. At 3 hours 5 minutes and 49 seconds, something appeared. No approach. No movement. Just suddenly there. A tall figure standing inches from the door. Perfectly still. Facing forward. The timestamp rolled forward. 3 hours 5 minutes and 50 seconds, 3 hours 5 minutes and 51 seconds. 3 hours 5 minutes and 52 seconds, the figure never moved. Then at 3 hours 6 minutes and 2 seconds, the head lifted slightly. As if looking directly into the camera. Daniel paused the frame. Zoomed in. The image blurred with digital noise. The shape had no visible details. No face. No features. Just darkness where a person should be. Then the footage continued. 3 hours 6 minutes and 5 seconds, the first knock echoed in the recording. The figure never raised an arm.